Welcome to AIW Empowers interview series. I'm so happy to welcome our guest, Alicia Disantis. I'm so happy to welcome you here today, Alicia. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So let's jump right in. Can
Do
you
it.
can you talk about your job today? What it is you do, and what is your job title?
Sure. So I am the owner of a branding and design agency called 38th and Kip. So it's a combination of brand strategy, marketing strategy, graphic design, and illustration. So kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum of marketing kind of combine into one. So everything from mission statements, company naming, taglines, all of those things that we don't even really think about on a day-to-day basis for our favorite brands, to custom illustrations, website icons, web design. So the whole gamut of marketing and design.
Sounds like you do quite a bit, and we're going to dive into that as well. But before we do, I want to travel back to the start of your career. Can you talk about where you started and how it is that you got here?
Sure. So I'm a traditional fine artist. So went to school for fine arts in college. So my bachelor's is in graphic design within the fine arts. So that would be like printmaking, illustration, like traditional printmaking with the press, right? Old
Mm-hmm.
school. My master's is in brand strategy and marketing management. So that's how I've got this combination of these two different pieces here. And it's interesting because I wanted to be a graphic designer in high school. I didn't really know what that meant. Then I wanted to be an illustrator. I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. I wanted to be a muralist. All these things that are really challenging. I wanted to be a video game concept artist for emerging video games. Quickly realized that that just was not going to happen, that I wasn't skilled enough in fine arts to do that. Pivoted over to marketing and ultimately graduated in the height of the Great Recession in 2010 in Chicago. There were no jobs in marketing and design. Really was very challenging for me. I remember sobbing in frustration. It, resume after resume after resume with this countdown of when I had to start paying back my student loans. You know, for Americans, like that's a really enormous component of life, especially in your 20s, is having when you have to start paying back those student loans.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars a month. So kind of put the design, put the marketing on the back burner, got a job at a bank in a sales role, did that for a couple of years. And at the same time, I decided to launch my own agency so I could at least have some semblance of sanity while I was doing a non-creative role. So that was 13 years ago. And since then, I've taken various full-time roles, a lot of different industries, and my business has grown and grown and grown. And now I think I've worked in 13 or 14 different industries. So it's just it's been a really wild ride, but I'm so lucky to get to do what I graduated in and what I was passionate about from the beginning.
And can you describe how it felt when you finally got to quit that bank job and say, I'm diving full time?
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I actually quit without another job lined up. And so I moved out to Denver. So this was at the time when the Rust Belt region. So I was living in Cleveland, Chicago and Cleveland were very heavily hit. And while the more Western United States cities seem to deal with the recession a little better. So left and took off for Denver and got a couple job offers in graphic design within a few months.
Wow.
So it really was, at the time it seems crazy now with hybrid and remote work to do that. But
Hmm.
at the time in 2012, that's what you had to do if you wanted a certain type of job. You had to move to a different city.
I mean, I think it takes great courage though to do that, especially given the time that that was happening. And you may not consider this one of them, so I'll ask, what mistakes did you make early in your career, whether it be in your industry or not?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest challenges, especially as a creative person, but across the board, being a young person in business, is not taking criticism well.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean, it's so important to have an open mind with that and allow yourself to be better from the constructive criticism you get from your peers and leaders and not get so angry. And I wish I would have done that earlier on. I wish I would have been more open minded, not been so defensive
Mhm.
about advice that was given to me. Another thing, I would have been more open to collaborating with people. So, not feeling like I had to do everything myself and realizing that, you know, more hands make lighter work, right? There's nothing wrong with asking for help and working together on something for a mutual benefit.
It's difficult, right? Especially when we're younger, because we have this impression or maybe pressure to be perfect, to have
Right.
it figured out, because we see the more senior people around us and we think they have it figured out. And then as we get more experience, we realize they look like they have it figured out because they know they don't. And
Exactly.
they take it in and they get help and they look at resources. So um I'm for sure you're not the only one in that boat. I know I was in that boat. It can be really hard to realize that, oh God, like if I'm not perfect, do I still belong here? And it gets into that whole imposter syndrome and everything else just snowballs into one.
Absolutely. Yeah, the imposter syndrome, so many people struggle with that, and it's proven that women struggle with it much, much more
Mhm.
than men. So that's something that I think most women in leadership roles struggle with. Maybe
Mhm.
not on a daily basis, but sometimes they do.
Most definitely. It just comes up even with very high up um in very high up positions, women who have decades of experience, they also bring it up. It's
Right.
it's pretty pervasive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Along the same lines, have there been any career setbacks um that you faced that you later realized were actually an advantage to you?
Yeah. So what I mentioned before was a huge one, actually, and it took me a long time to recognize what a blessing in disguise that was. So my job, I worked at Chase Bank in a not great area of Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
During the recession, where I got paid for selling credit cards, mortgages, investments, all of these things that really nobody needed or wanted at the time. And it was very challenging. We had cold calling. We had a lot of things that still kind of thinking about it, twists my stomach.
Mhm.
And that job taught me so much about communicating with people and empathizing with people that are very different than you. So this bank was right next to, I don't know if in Canada you have something similar like a welfare, a Section 8 housing. So people that don't either have a disability or something, they get the housing to live in, government assistance.
Mhm.
So these people would come in and had no concept of a bank account, or they'd be on check systems. Um, very bad credit, all these different things. And what it did is it really gave me the ability to connect with people very different than me and be patient with the process, and taught me a lot of life lessons around finance and around selling and buyer behavior that I was able to use with my own business now and in marketing, because really marketing is so closely tied to sales.
And have you felt that, being able to take those skills and transfer them, that you've been able to, I guess, get an angle that people who wouldn't have had that experience or went straight into the stream don't have?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of times people that business owners or people in marketing that don't have a lot of experience with a wide variety of people
Mhm.
and a lot of different classes and races and demographics, they can't really get the full picture of what makes people tick and how to interact with people. So when you're selling your services to somebody, you don't really know what kind of client they're going to be like.
Mhm.
You don't really know what types of clients they have that they're hiring you to help them get more of. You can't ever really judge a book by its cover. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes the people that seem the most put together are the ones who are the worst clients or the worst people to do business with, or the people that won't pay you, things like that. So I think this is another lesson going back to what you said. I would have not been so judgmental. I felt like I would judge so much of my profession on status or title or things like that. A lot of those things that aren't even really truly reflective of the skill and expertise that somebody has.
Mhm.
Really, a title isn't anything, right? It's really all about what you're doing behind it and the impact you're making.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I want to switch it up a little bit, Alicia, to your biggest success factor, because everything you've mentioned has helped build your foundation to where you are now. But if you had to pinpoint one thing, what would you highlight as your biggest success factor?
So, one thing, so it's tough. So, I would say being honest.
Okay.
So, I'm very transparent about what I do, not just in terms of pricing, but what I'm capable of. And I never lie about what I can do for someone. If I can't do it, I will tell them. There isn't ever any stringing along. If I can't meet a deadline, I will tell them. I'll apologize if I mess up. I think that just goes back to being a good person,
Hmm.
being an ethical person. And sometimes you may miss out on opportunities that are kind of cutthroat or where you injure someone else by getting ahead.
Hmm.
And my goal is to never do that. So I've found that just the ethics behind what I do, it's really resonated with people, especially in an industry that can be really competitive like marketing and design.
So the integrity has helped attract the right kind of clients for your business.
Yeah, it's kind of like good people attract good people,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, I have so many incredible clients that I trust and are my friends, and I owe that to me trying to be a good person, right? It's
Hmm.
like what's the phrase? You attract the company, you are the company you keep.
Hmm.
That's not, I don't think that's as true with friends. I think that's true with your business relationships too.
Hmm. I love that. And you've gotten to this point and have been able to get the kind of business that you want. You're doing the work that you like. what kind of sacrifices have you had to make along the way? And do you find now that those were worth it?
Absolutely. It depends what day you
Oh, yeah.
if you ask me at midnight and I'm tired and I'm trying to get some work done, then I'm gonna say I just want to go to bed. Um, but yeah, the time associated that goes into running a business and being an entrepreneur is just enormous. Um, I routinely work till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Um, Often work holidays. I feel like I'm always working. I mean, part of that's just me because sometimes I'll see a logo I like on the street and I got to take a picture of it and analyze it, or I see a tagline I like. But there are times, especially on a beautiful summer evening, where I want to be outside
Mhm.
and I'm inside working. And burnout is a very real thing for entrepreneurs, I'm sure you know.
Mhm.
Um, for anyone who wants to go down the path of consulting or entrepreneurship, it just takes a lot of time. And to me, it's worth it because I love what I do, but it's not for someone who wants a very, very balanced work life.
Right. And because your work is so creative, this is something that part of my work also involves, and the creative juices are not always flowing. Sometimes you're not in the headspace, or sometimes you're not in the headspace to do the opposite. There's admin work to do, but you want to create. How do you deal with those moments?
I think a lot of that comes with doing this for over 15 years. There's tried and true methods I have to kind of snap out of it. So one of them is exercising.
Okay.
Enormously impactful for me. There has been so many breakthrough marketing and design experiences I've had from running or even just walking. Um, there's some new studies, well, not new, I guess in the past decade, some studies out there that show how the benefits walking can have
Mhm.
for creative thinking and
Okay.
problem solving. That it does something to your brain with I'm not sure exactly, but even walking like 10 minutes can have these results. So if I'm stuck, I'll go for a walk or go for a run. I have go-to inspiration. So I have different websites and books that I will just look at and sketch and just without real any end goal or pressure. And I
Hmm.
find that that really helps too. Trying to work through a problem or be creative without the pressure of creating something really incredible. Just kind of seeing what happens.
Hmm.
Those are my two key things. And if those don't work, then I just go to bed
Yeah.
and sleep.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then usually the next day I feel pretty good.
I think that's something that, we sometimes forget is an option. That if you can't get it
Yeah.
done, sometimes you just have to not do it right now.
Right.
You need to sleep.
Right. Just go to bed. And I try to have good time management that I'm not ever up against a deadline that much
Yeah.
that what I'm struggling with can't wait till tomorrow.
Yeah. Really great pieces of advice, though, I think, for anyone who gets stuck in that situation. Um, there's the shower ideas, right? So like exercise might be
Mhm.
that key. So, along with the hard questions, um, so you've been doing this for quite some time now, but where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years if you're looking just a little bit ahead?
Sure. So I'd love to keep growing. I'd love to keep just staying on the straight and narrow, expanding my business, helping more and more clients. My goal is to help clients who what I call the people doing good in the world.
Mhm.
So these are purpose-driven companies, those that are making a positive impact,
Mhm.
right? So there's really no neutral. There's businesses that are doing good and businesses that are doing bad. There's no zero really when it comes to humankind.
Mhm.
I mean, off the top of our heads, I'm sure we can think of quite a few businesses that are not good businesses, right? Or people that are not good people. And then there's these businesses that really are doing incredible things,
Mm-hmm.
even very small businesses that are doing incredible things. So my goal is to always help the people who are that, plus one, that are not the negative one.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but just holding on for the ride. And, I'd love to keep growing and just keep producing really great work and helping people tell their stories and connect with customers because there's so many great businesses out there that don't really know how to talk about themselves, or
Yeah.
they all sound the same. And all I need is a little bit of help to find a couple key phrases to help them explain what they do differently.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that makes all the difference.
So you said you don't know what the future holds, so I'm gonna ask you to think about it. If you could have it your way, right? What are your long-term goals? Past the 5 to 10 years, what do you see around you?
I'd like to have my own office or my own office building.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell you that's a really big thing. I think I fall, and I'd be curious to hear what our listeners think. I fall into the camp where I really do not like working from home.
Yeah.
It it's difficult for me to compartmentalize my life. And I also it's hard for me to break away from it. I felt like I had a much better work-life balance when I had an office
Mm-hmm.
I could go to. I could ride my bike home, drive home, walk home, whatever. I don't like the confinement and the isolation of being in an at home. So as soon as it makes financial sense, I would most definitely want to rent or purchase a building to have my office in
Mm-hmm.
and any of my employees when it makes sense to have them there as well.
That's really, I see that as a fun goal, right? Because having your own space opens up all the creative juices again, where you can
Right.
start organizing it in a certain way and, really making it around what your culture is.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I envy these folks who have their own office and they have all types of different artwork and bookshelves and all these different
Mm-hmm.
things, and they can go there and they can just work or think. And they're not thinking about the dishes, or they're not thinking about, any variety of things that come with working from home.
Mm-hmm.
Or on the flip side, I'm not sitting on the couch trying to watch Seinfeld thinking, maybe I should just go check my email or go do something for a half an hour before bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not it's not sustainable and it leads to burnout.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that it would impact not just the culture, but anyone that you have under your employ? So, having them come in and, theoretically, if they feel the same way that being in the office is very helpful, to start building that together? Or do you already have something in mind beyond that of, what you would want for your employees and what kind of things you would want to implement for them?
Yeah, and that's a really good point actually. And one I haven't thought of because designers and creative folks, they typically need more space
Yeah.
than the than other industries, than other workers. You need space to draw. A lot of times you need space, you need multiple monitors. And if especially younger people who have smaller apartments or don't have a lot of fancy furniture, who are just kind of, doing the IKEA thing, they're young, they're just out of college. They don't often have the space. Some people I know work from their dining room table,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you're not going to be able to produce physically, well, physically and mentally, you're not going to be able to produce your best work sitting like that, sitting in a dining room chair or, a non-ergonomic chair.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's such a great point. Having a space where there's room and there's resources can be so huge. And one that I think a lot of people don't really think about within
Hmm.
this industry, that you need that space.
And I'm sure, you mentioned before getting inspiration from certain websites or you look at books. And so I'm sure that even just seeing what your colleague is doing, a room over or as you walk by might help your own mind to get going as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's significant I don't know what other better word to use. I know this is a overused word, but a synergy with
Hmm.
being in an office with other people.
Hmm.
You're gonna have more interaction with them than on Teams or on Zoom. This is natural.
Hmm.
So, and there's definitely pros to working from home, but it's just not for me.
Yeah. And that's completely fair. Everyone's different, and so you have to go with
Mhm.
what works for yourself. And you
Yep,
mentioned people just coming out of school. Can you talk a bit about what your educational background is and what educational preparation you feel is best for someone who wants to work in this field?
sure. So I'll talk about both fields because really I'm a combination. I
Right.
don't know anyone else that does both branding and design, like brand strategy and
Hmm.
design. So I'll talk about the design first. So I got accepted into a major art school and ended up dropping out after a couple of weeks for a wide variety of reasons. And then I enrolled in a public university and got my art education there. It was a great education. The one thing I would say about graphic design is that you need to find a way to create work that isn't just university work, like work that actually looks like something you would have in a portfolio.
Okay.
So that could be doing some nonprofit work or volunteering, actually creating work for companies because employers are going to recognize the difference between college portfolio work and work created for an actual company, regardless of whether you got paid or not. There's a whole other dynamic of working with decision makers and all these different people that you don't really have in a student faculty environment.
Mm.
So that's one thing I would really recommend is having a portfolio that is more commercial. On the marketing side, I know this sounds crazy that I'm even saying this as a progressive, but those marketing fundamentals exist for a reason. Like those
Mm.
marketing 101, like a SWOT analysis
Hmm.
or like basic accounting concepts. Like, yeah, they're not fun for creatives, but I find myself going back to those all the time. So don't just ignore these fundamentals, are also design fundamentals for that reason, because they exist for a reason. And you can rely on them to be a much better professional. Um, I'm trying to think what else to say about that. It's a lot of things I would tell someone.
Hmm.
Um, I would also say network as much as you can and never think an opportunity is too small.
Hmm.
You never know what's going to come of it. If you have to go to a, garbage symposium, go to it. You don't know what's going to happen, right? If you got nothing else to do, go to it.
I think it's great advice, because people in post-secondary sometimes think it's too early or they're not feeling it, which that's how I felt in university, get me to class, get me home, leave me alone.
Right.
um but I would do it differently now. You don't know where those schoolmates will be. You don't know where you'll be. It's great to have those connections and be able to even exchange ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything, it gets you out of your comfort zone, which is another huge thing. Talking to people you don't know, that's a huge skill that I feel like you aren't ever taught.
Yeah.
And that's so much of being a professional is talking to people either one, you don't know, or two, you don't like, and still being nice, right? Those are
Hmm.
two big things.
And I mean, talking about that, are there any social obligations that come along with your field? Some that you've either opted in or that you feel are necessary?
Absolutely. Yeah. So having a social media presence, whether I like it or not, is big. Having a social media presence that's actually one that so let me back up. I have to practice what I preach. I can't just say to a company, I'm not a social media expert, but to say, do this and this and this, and then I don't do it myself, or I have no brand on certain platforms. So there certainly is an obligation that I need to be posting regularly. I need to be creating Instagram reels, YouTube shorts, experimenting on behalf of my clients to figure out what's going to work.
Hmm.
So I have friends that say, you don't just want to take a break. Get off social media if you don't want to be on it. It's not that I don't want to be on it, but there is an obligation. I
Hmm.
pretty much have to be on it. The other thing is maybe not so much social obligation, but cultural trends. I was just talking about this with someone the other day that I need to be aware of movies, literature, current events, all these things that shape how what people want, what they
Hmm.
want to buy, how they interact with a company. So whether I like it or not, I'm watching the Super Bowl. I'm watching the commercials. I'm watching the Oscar winning movies. All these different things that I just need to be aware of. Like Barbie, for example. It's a cultural phenomenon. If I
Hmm.
didn't watch that movie, I feel like I'd be missing out on a huge piece of marketing and design for 2023.
It's so interesting you say that because for whatever reason, that never occurred to me. The need to not just know about it, but see it for yourself
Yeah.
and how important that is. And even if you're not into it, it's important to know. So I really am happy that you mentioned that because like
Right.
I do marketing and I try to keep up with stuff, but thinking like, oh, there's this movie that's really not my type, but I really should watch it just to understand. And even with all the research I've done and whatnot, I've never seen that being said. But as you're saying, it just sinks in and says it's of course you do. Of course.
Yeah. It's that battle of, as we get older, we get less and less, we're less further and further removed from what like the relevant, the
Yes.
from the that hose that's pumping out all of the most relevant media and content and everything, right? So
Hmm.
I'm very well aware that every year I age, I have to work that much harder to understand the
Hmm.
trends going on in our society.
That's so wise. And the fact that you're aware, right? Like that just it's just a thank you for saying that. I appreciate I feel like a lot of light bulbs will be going off, not just mine.
I know what you're doing this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have 5 days to do all these things, so
Yep.
start tomorrow.
Right.
Oh my goodness. So, we've met a couple times before this to talk about the interview, but we've talked about how it is to work, in both industries that you have. And you've mentioned that the balance is uneven in terms of the representation of men and women. So
Sure.
could you take just a little bit of time and just talk to us about the culture in your industries?
Sure. So it's interesting. I think I read a study, was it last year, that the majority of people in marketing and design, or at least in marketing, are women. But across the board, it's vastly disproportionate of the owners and the decision makers are men. So you still kind of have that Mad Men scenario
Mhm.
where you have Peggy, for any listeners who have watched Mad Men, you have Peggy who's producing all this incredible work, but you still have Don Draper, or these various men that are the ones that are they're owning the agency. They're making the big decisions. So it's interesting to me that it's so flip-flopped in this way that there's because women are great marketers. I think there's specific studies that show that women in general are better communicators than men are, and also better at emotional empathy and things like that. A lot of the things that go into being a good marketer. So you have all these women that are doing more of the mid management or entry level tasks, and then you have all the men at the top. And as an owner of an agency, that's something I'm very cognizant of, that I see all this representation of men and not very many women.
Do you feel that it's been changing? Are you seeing any progression of reversing that trend and the impact that's had on the kind of marketing products coming out?
I haven't, no, but that's anecdotal, and that's
Mhm.
not to say it isn't happening. And I'm by no means an expert in these sort of things, but the people I know who who do entrepreneurial work or have their own agencies or this type of thing, I haven't noticed a lot of newer people coming in that is shifting the dynamic.
Okay.
And by noticing, I purely mean, again, anecdotally, browsing LinkedIn and seeing the majority of my LinkedIn is men from an ownership perspective,
Right.
while the women are talking more about different trends and, producing incredible work. But
Hmm.
there still is that dynamic. And I'd actually be really curious, just to back up my opinions here, if we could pull some stats, and that's something I could look at too, to see if there is a trend. I know that the pandemic significantly hindered women in the workplace. A lot
Hmm.
of women stepped back from their roles to stay at home or to care for their kids that were that couldn't go to school. So I don't know if we're still recovering from that, but it is something that continues to be pervasive.
And it's important, right? You talk about Barbie, and it was such a phenomenon, and the marketing that went behind it, and the strong female voices that were included, and a huge part in driving that bus. Um, and that is the one that we think of now, because if we think of the last 10 years, we don't have a lot to point to. And so if that change is happening, but very slowly, we're not going to see the results right now. We may see it, pumped out in a big way later in the future, so that whether or not it's happening, it's not where it needs to be. I think that's the main message. And there's a lot of other things I think changing that could impact that. We were talking about AI. Do you see that as the main way this field is changing or could change? Do you see other things that could come into play?
AI is so huge right now.
Yeah.
It is. I'm one of the few people that I'm just like, whatever happens, happens. But
Yeah.
people, so it's funny to talk about this. So in August, I went with a close friend to Adobe. Adobe had a road show where they went to all these different cities and had drinks and food and invited people in to show off the new AI product, which is called Firefly. And they booked a theater, a local, like small time theater in Denver, booked out the theater. And so they actually were all sitting in these velvet seats. And when they brought up the new tool and you click a button that literally creates, it's a prompt, a dog in a Christmas sweater. It creates, a series of 5 different ones, and you can just refresh over and over and over again. People were heckling the Adobe speaker.
Oh,
The
okay.
guys behind me and other people in the audience were like, AI sucks. Keep human jobs. And I remember being like, what kind of world am I living in right now? Like, it's there's people in the industry that are so disturbed by it.
Mm.
especially writers and illustrators, because that's basically what, AI can do. I don't know. I'm not really all that worried. At least now, the quality really isn't enough.
Mhm.
It's not the same. And yeah, it's huge. It's everywhere. It's everywhere right now. I mean, it's like every other image is an AI image at this point. And I mean, it is. I mean, the one thing that's scary, this is getting off on a little bit of a tangent. Have you seen the fake Tom Cruise video?
I think I've heard of it. It's like I did not see it, no.
It is, I don't know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes of footage of Tom Cruise that does not exist. It's created, all AI created. And he's talking at the camera. And I think there's one he's like playing golf or doing something, and it's all fake. And I would never have known. There's no way I could tell. That's really interesting. And also the voice, the fake
Mhm.
voices. That's another thing too that's crazy.
So it's part of the deep fakes, right? Like they are talking
Yep.
about the possibility of particularly important people being having a dupe out there, and people thinking it's real, and how do we ethically manage that?
Right. Well, we were talking uh off record about
Mhm.
the couple of months ago, the shakeup with that women in tech conference, where the whole
Hmm.
thing, the plug was pulled on the whole thing because they had a seat to fill for a woman presenter, and they artificially generated a woman. And just, I don't know if someone maybe forgot to change it, or I have no clue, but the whole thing was just uproarious and kind of hilarious that this is what we're living in right now.
It is, and it brings up, I think, some as a feminist, it brings up a bit of it shakes me up a little bit that you have a women's conference and you're going to make up a woman, along the same lines of there's this very I think successful influencer, I think maybe on TikTok or Instagram, and she is built by AI by a man. So it's one of those icky kind of like, oh,
Mhm.
it's cool to do that, but should you do that? And what does that mean for the things that we're actually standing behind or the message we're trying to send? So
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the funniest things I read about it, someone said, was there were literally not another woman in technology you could find to speak
mhm.
at this event. You had to make up a fake woman.
Yes,
Unbelievable.
it's it brings up the question, or I guess the statement could be a question. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. So
Right.
there's that balance. Yeah. um,
Absolutely.
so looking at the people that your colleagues, people you've worked with in your industry that you're in contact with, when people leave this career, what are the usual reasons that you've observed?
First one that comes to mind is burnout.
Hmm.
I think people in especially in agencies where they're not the owner, they're more like a mid-level or senior level designer or marketer or account management. It is ferocious. I thankfully have not had to do that since I was in college. I had an unpaid internship back in the day of unpaid internships, and it'll just eat you alive. And that's one of the reasons I started my own agency, because I didn't want to be like that. I didn't
Hmm.
want to have that. And just the deadlines and the insanity and just, bad clients and uh, a lot of people leave for that reason. A lot of people leave because they think it's going to be easy, especially in design. They think, oh, I'm just going to get to make art all day. And they realize it's kind of like the whole thing with like, oh, I'm going to take an art class as an elective. And then it turns out to be one of the most difficult classes, you
Hmm.
know. Um, that it's not easy, and a lot of times it's not rewarding. And another huge thing too is that for me, I don't even really think about it anymore, is that it's so gray. There's no black and white. So you can spend months or even years working on a project. And because it's in a creative industry, some accountant or some senior level or C level person could not like it for any variety of reasons that there's really no metrics assigned to. And
Mm-hmm.
that's it. I don't like it. That's it. Start over. So the struggle of people who really need defined measurements of success,
Yeah.
like how do you really define whether a logo is successful? I mean, maybe over time the company will grow and the profits will go up or there'll be new customers, but it's a lot different than other areas of business and other skills where there's a very specific end. And in this field, you have to get really used to living with the esoteric nature
Mm-hmm.
of creativity.
Do you find it difficult, I guess, in the beginning to, as an artist, to create things that you maybe don't like, but you know fits what the client's looking for? And it's, you would never make that if you weren't looking to get paid for it. It's never something you would create. Have you had to do that where you find like, well, I really dislike this thing, but they love it. It fits what they want. Here you go.
Right. Right. So yeah, that's what's that called? The sellout, right? So that was a lot more pervasive when I was younger. And I I just wanted to please the client.
Hmm.
Or, just starting out, I needed money, so I would take, wide variety of clients or projects. Now that I'm older, I have the luxury of saying no. Or a better way to phrase that would be, I never create something that I don't like.
Hmm.
So if I have 5 logos to design, 5 logo concepts, I'm not just going to throw one in there just because I couldn't think of anything else and hope they don't like it either. You better believe that you're going to choose that one. And I bring this up because I had an agency owner last year talk to myself and the marketing team I was working with that that's what he does. And I was so disgusted that those were his ethics. He said, yeah, you make a couple good ones and then you just throw in the rest. I'm like, well, hold on a second. That's not that's not helping anyone. That's not helping you. That's not helping the client. That's not helping the industry. If you are not 100% confident with every single design you create or marketing strategy or whatever social media post, then you need to go to bed, get up the next morning, and think of something else. And that might be an unpopular opinion, but that's how I see it.
Well, it's not what you're getting paid for, right? You're getting paid for your talent, not your ability to half do one and say it's good enough because it's part of the number I have to make.
Exactly.
Hmm. Now, beyond this person, um,
This unnamed man
yes,
who owns an agency, right?
yes. Beyond that person, considering all the other people that you've met in the field, what personal attributes would you consider to be essential for success in this field?
So a lot of this goes back to what I talked about with what I wish I knew or what I would have done earlier when I was younger. So one is being humble. That is so huge. I mean, there's always going to be people way better than you.
Mm.
And you're just never going to be the best. I mean, maybe if you set out for your entire life to be the best at one time, you're going to be, but I recognize now I'm never going to be the best designer. Um, I'm never going to be the best writer. And the continual striving for betterment and for that feedback and to not get offended if a client or someone, a coworker doesn't like what I made. Sometimes it just happens. I don't like any of these logos, Alicia. That's okay, right?
Mhm.
They're not insulting me. It takes a while sometimes. So having that humility and being humble about what you're doing and continuing to learn, learning is another huge one.
Mhm.
That this is not a profession that you can get stagnant. And this again goes back to what we just talked about with the culture. You got to always be looking at trends and always be researching and always be willing to learn new technologies. Because there's so many coming out all the time. I mean, even I'm guilty of that. That there's a lot of software I have not had a chance to learn yet.
Mhm. There are always new things, right? And you mentioned saying that you're not going to be the best at this or at that. But if I can rephrase, perhaps put a different light on it, is that all these things are subjective, right? So it's more part of, and correct me if I'm wrong, finding your audience.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm never going to be the number one designer in the world as presented by, I don't know, whoever the top design agency is, whatever. But that's all subjective too. And a lot of times those are sponsors and there's a lot of stuff that goes in.
Mhm.
It's never 100% objective. But you're absolutely right. If I can be the best for a client's need, so right place, right time, right person,
Mhm.
then that's enough for me. And truly nothing makes me happier than when I show a client a logo for their business that they have worked so hard to create their vision, their baby, and they say, I absolutely love this. I mean, man, it's just unbelievable. That's something in my brain that I can draw is going to make that much of a difference on them. It's so huge.
Would you say that that's what you like the most about your work, is being able to make that connection from their words to your art or your marketing to their needs?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I think that's the most rewarding is seeing the look on their face when when they see something they really love that I've created.
Mm-hmm.
Or and secondly, when I'm a very collaborative person, so I love working with people. When I have a partner that I work very closely with and we produce something great for them and there's that energy there. It's so awesome. It's so awesome. It's like being in a relay race. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Oh, that's great. And I know this question is, not straightforward. Um, but if you can, pick as normal week as you can you kind of walk us through a typical week for you, whatever that looks like?
Sure. Yeah, it's okay. So typical week. So I would tell you I'm not a morning person. I produce my best work in the evenings. Uh, I find I produce my best work between the hours of like 4 and 10 p.m. So sometimes I'll even work till midnight, if I have the time and I have anything else going on. So right now I'm doing consulting full time for an organization in technology, financial technology. Great, great guys. And so that's my full time role. So I'm pretty much starting 9, working at 6. Maybe I'll take a uh, a break within that time to meet with a client or do something like that. And then I work out, I cook dinner, and I go back to work. And I usually work till 10 or 11. So that's typically Monday through Thursday. Uh, I will do that. If I have a real tight project, I really try to avoid um, deadlines, really tight deadlines, because it's just not good for me, not good for my health to do that. Um, but I'll work on weekends if I have to. Sometimes I'll work on weekends anyway if the weather's bad or whatever. But I usually design. If I have design work, I'll design in the evenings. I'll draw and design in the evenings when it's dark. A lot of my writing. So if I have to write like a marketing strategy or a web page or some taglines or things like that that I really have to focus, I'll do that in the afternoon. I reserve Fridays for more creative time because Fridays are less busy for me. So things that I don't want to get dinged constantly, and I
Mm-hmm.
need that time where it's focus time. Speaking of focus time, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Pomodoro method.
Oh,
It's
it's so
changed
familiar.
my life. It's
Yes.
basically so it's a method of time management and focus. But you can just download the little Pomodoro app and set it for as many minutes as you want. And you can even get ones that turn off all your notifications. And then it just dings when it's done. It's time for a 5 minute break. And then you can go back and do it as many times.
That
It's
sounds
great.
lovely.
It's Pomodoro like the tomato.
Mm-hmm.
So I found when I have something really tough I have to do, and it's just like, oh, I just don't want to do this. I'll turn on that Pomodoro and it does help.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
To me, just turning off the notifications is fantastic.
And I
You know.
think having the timer too, to me, it's like, okay, like as an athlete, it kind of goes back to the days of, I got to do this for this certain amount of time,
Mm.
right? I have to run for this certain amount of time or
Mm-hmm.
swim. So to me, psychologically, it really helps.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
that's
also, I live and die by my planner,
oh yeah.
knowing what I need to do on this day. I instantly forget if I don't put it in my planner. So, got organization is key.
Organization, yeah. Um, Especially as a business owner, right? Because if you let something drop, no one's going to pick it up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to have accountability, right? For
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm. And it's, now that you're doing consulting as well, um, if you're able to, are you able to tell us about either a big project that you're working on or that you've recently finished in the last few months, without naming names or going into details
Sure.
to put anyone in the spotlight, but if there's anything that you can
Sure.
tell us about.
Geez, it's been the past 6 months have been wild, and the past month especially has been wild. So I'll tell you about a client I've had, still working ongoing with them. They are a credit union in the United States based out of Denver. They've been around for 70 years. Small credit union, enormous, enormously impactful things I do for the community. And, underserved, underbanked, people that can't get loans, all these different things. And we started working together, geez, about 15 months ago, full rebrand. So their logo, I don't think their logo had been updated in 20 years, 30 years.
Wow.
And their logo was not a representation of what they did. It did not represent the impact and power that they made and how much they help people. And these are mortgages we're talking about. These are enormous, enormous things that can impact someone's life forever. The ability to get a mortgage or to get a car loan so you can get a car to get to a job that pays you more to get out of that cycle of poverty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So full rebrand. So funny. They had hired someone else to do some work for what's called an ideal client profile. So that's figuring out what types of customers you have and then understanding what they need from you and how to talk to them and what type of information they need. So this company did this for them beforehand, and literally one of the way they organized it was white mother in the suburbs. It's like, okay, that's not telling us anything about what that person needs from a financial organization. White
Mm-hmm.
mother in the suburbs. Like, I hate how just generic it is and is ridiculous. And it's almost insulting as a female, like that we're all have the same motivations because we're women. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
bizarre. So looking at all that stuff, uh, they did a full brand launch at a party in the summertime. So I got to go to that. It's awesome. So now I'm on the tail end of helping them with a new website. So their website was pretty outdated, hard to navigate, hard to figure out where to go to things. So it's been a full sweep of their entire identity. Do you hear that dog?
Oh yes. I love
Do
it.
you hear him? Yeah,
Not
okay.
anymore, but
He'll stop in a second. He'll stop in a second. I was at a good stopping point anyway. Hold on a second. Let him do his thing.
he's got to get it out.
He's got to get it out. Leah, my partner's home, so
Okay.
he knows I'm on this anyway. Um, I think he's done. Okay, let me go back to it. So the impact it's made and what it's done for their customers and how they're being viewed and how people trust them with their money and with their financial decisions. Because it's very different to have a whole new website and a whole new logo, especially the website. You don't want a website that looks like you're going to get hacked if you go to it, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
go to online bill pay and think it's going to hack your accounts. Like so much of that stuff is really critical to the
Mm-hmm.
success of an organization. So it's been awesome. It's been a year and a half project with them. Basically just one of my favorite types of work where it's bare bones.
Mm-hmm.
You start at the studs and it's awesome.
It
So
must
that's
be
been really, really wonderful.
it must be fantastic with those kinds of projects to be able to keep an eye on them after and see what impact your work has had after.
Yeah, it is. And so many of my clients have become longtime friends. And, after working with someone closely for a year and a half, half the conversation is us just laughing and joking and then getting to work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's super fun. But even like, so I'll give you a very specific example. Just today, so as of airing or as of recording, I met with the client to talk about what type of photography we want on the website, what type of stock photography, because what kind of photography you have on your website really makes a difference in the mood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's black and white, whether it's really colorful, all these different things, whether what kind of people you have, what types of environments. So just those things like that people don't even really think about. Like when you go to a website, what does the photography look like and how does that make you feel, your experience on that website?
Mm-hmm. I think, even starting to pay attention as someone who wasn't doing this kind of work in the past, starting to pay attention to those little things of like,
Mhm.
oh, now I see all these colors looping into each other and like this is
Mhm.
matching that. And as someone without that background, if you're not paying attention, you don't see um those little details, but you just realize that you're having a good experience. You love the look. Um,
Yep.
and when you go to a different website and it's not really thought through that something seems off about this website. I don't like it. It's not well done. And you leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You can't pinpoint it, but there's
Yeah.
something there, right? And it's
Yeah.
something just unsettling. And even so what I would ask our listeners to do is pick two websites in the same industry. So go to two different banking websites or two different gym websites or any variety of things and compare what types of photos are on those websites. Which one feels more energetic? Which one feels more serious? And you'll start to get an idea for how those companies are trying to portray themselves to
Hmm.
get your business. It's very fascinating to look at two websites side by side and see what types of imagery they're using. And if they're bad, they'll use the same stock photo. I've seen it before. competitors that use the exact same stock photo.
Oh no.
I know. It's like, hey, I've seen that girl before dangling keys out the window of a new car.
Yeah.
I swear I've seen her before.
Oh no. Well, I hope people do this because I think it's a really fun, interesting exercise. And then you start to realize, there's psychology behind this and there's reason
Oh, yeah,
typically why things are done.
definitely. The other huge thing too, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, this is the last thing I'll say about it, is buttons. So what buttons look like on different websites, what color the button is, and what does the button say? There's a ton of theory behind which colors on buttons make you click them. So very, very interesting stuff.
Interesting. Which colors?
So it depends on the industry.
Okay.
Um, so for example, red is not really one you want to use in finance, right? Because red
Mm.
is associated with being in the red,
Mm-hmm.
losing money, things like that. A lot of what I'm seeing right now is purple,
Oh,
uh, but yellow kind of is another one too, that it's associated with uh, warning.
right.
So there's so much in there that kind of that goes back hundreds of years of even of our society. So
Yeah.
very fascinating stuff.
Oh, that's cool. Everyone go research now. So I asked you this question before about other people in your industry, but I would love to hear from you if you ever decided to leave your industries, what would most likely drive you away?
Oh, that is so hard. It's hard for me to even fathom not
Mm.
working in this industry.
And I can rephrase also if you want to think of it in two ways.
No,
Uh,
I mean, yeah, well, go ahead. Go ahead.
so either, something drives you away and what that is, and or the industry's eliminated, what do you feel prepared to do?
Right. So that's actually what I was going to say is that maybe
Okay.
the industry maybe AI gets powerful enough that there is honestly no need for designers anymore.
Hmm.
Even and it gets so powerful enough that there's no need for brand strategy, buyer behavior, any of that stuff. I think if that happens, we probably got bigger problems on our hands as a
Hmm.
society. And I'm not really going to be worrying about a job at that point. We're going to be worrying about, the matrix happening. I mean, it's really tough. There's really nothing. I think if someone came along and said, have a full-time role as an illustrator or as
Hmm.
a painter, that would be hard for me to turn down. But that's just so unrealistic. And that's just, not going to happen. But to to work solely in the fine arts,
Hmm.
that's probably the only thing that would move me away from what I do.
Right. And we never say never. And
Well, yeah, we never say never.
even AI needs to get its ideas from somewhere. And that
Yeah,
somewhere is usually people.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, Alicia, I want to thank you so much for taking some time today and having this interview with us. All the information you shared was really insightful and like also
Thank
super
you.
fun. So I hope that people take your challenges and go do them, but I also think that you're going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much for taking the time. But before I let you go, I would love to give you the floor and if you could give advice to people considering working in these fields or who are just starting, what would you like to say to them?
Let's say be patient. Don't give up. It's not going to be easy. I don't know a single person in this field that got what they wanted immediately, that they got that dream job right out of college. Unless you're very wealthy and you have connections, your family has connections, it's going to take time. And you're probably going to be doing more of what you don't like than what you do like at first. You're not going to be doing these outrageous, incredible creative projects. If that happens to you, find a way to be creative so you can stay sane and get yourself through it. Don't give up. Don't just take a job that, oh, I'm only going to do this. Okay, I got this sales, I got selling car insurance, whatever. I'm going to take it at Progressive and I'll come back to this. It's unlikely you'll come back to it because you get phased out pretty easily. And especially if you get a cushy job, it's really hard to get back into it. So even if it's the most bare bones project, anything, and especially now with all social media and all these different platforms, you can be a creative or be a designer and share it with your platform and still keep that creativity going. But don't ever stop. Because once you stop, it's really hard to start again. And the other thing I would tell people is to not get jaded and not get discouraged by others' success. It's really, really hard when you see someone appear, get a great job, and you feel that your work is better than theirs, right? You think you're better. There's a comparison factor there. We can't control it. We're human. But do what you can to not get jaded. If you work hard and you network with people and you're a good person and you don't burn bridges, you will get to where you want to be eventually.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Lynn.